I'm the Criminologist, your guide through the shadows where facts meet fear. Tonight, I'm walking you into two cases that once felt unsolvable. A young couple stolen in the dark and a husband who vanished into thin air. Listen closely. The truth is colder than the night it hides in. Warren Fulton and Rachel Raver are the names of a couple that had been dating for approximately 3 to 4 months when their lives were tragically ended. They met each other at George Washington University, where they both attended. Warren was a student athlete and as a senior aimed to complete his English degree. Additionally, Warren was skilled enough at baseball that he attracted the attention of MLB scouts, specifically the Cincinnati Reds. Rachel was attending GW on a partial soccer scholarship and pursued an education major. However, her ultimate ambition was to attend a law school at the University of Virginia after finishing her time at her current school. December 3, 1988 began like any other day. The evening began with what had become a routine for the couple. Warren brought Rachel to his family home in Vienna, Virginia, for dinner with his mother, Jackie. Following dinner, the couple attended a Christmas party. After the party, rather than ending their evening and returning to their respective homes, Warren and Rachel made a decision that would ultimately prove fatal. They chose to continue their night out by visiting Mr. Day's sports bar in Washington, D.C. The couple's behavior at the bar was later described as normal. They appeared to be enjoying each other's company, engaging in conversation with no signs of distress. As the evening progressed, the couple continued their time at the bar, apparently unaware that they were being observed or that danger was approaching. The two left at approximately 12:30 a.m. on December 4th. As they exited the bar and entered the nearby alley, they encountered Alfredo Prieto. The specific details of how Alfredo approached or gained control over the couple remain unclear, but it is believed that financial gain was the primary motive. After subduing the couple, Alfredo gained access to Rachel's vehicle and transported them to Reston, Virginia. Police believe that they arrived at the location around 1 or 1:30 a.m., which is the time frame where residents of the area reported hearing gunshots. On the morning of December 6, 1988, the bodies of both victims were discovered in a vacant field located at the 1800 block of Hunter Mill Road, positioned just south of the Dulles Toll Road in Fairfax County. This location was in a semi-rural area that was undergoing development, but still contained undeveloped parcels of land that provided the isolation Alfredo needed to commit his crimes without immediate detection. Rachel's partially nude body was found lying in the field, while Warren's fully clothed body was discovered approximately 100 feet away from Rachel's location. Later, evidence would confirm that Rachel was assaulted prior to her death. Her clothing was found scattered halfway between the locations where her and Warren's body were discovered. The medical examination of both victims was conducted by Dr. Francis P. Field. He determined that Rachel had been killed by a single gunshot that entered her lower left back. The trajectory of the shot suggested that the gun was fired as Rachel was attempting to flee. Beyond the gunshot wound, Rachel's body showed extensive evidence of physical trauma. She had scraping of the skin on her abdomen, legs, hands, and face, indicating that she had been dragged or had struggled against a rough surface. Additionally, Rachel had a bruise on her neck, suggesting that she may have been grabbed or restrained during the assault. Through the autopsy, DNA evidence was also obtained from Rachel's remains. As for Warren, it was determined that he too died from a gunshot wound which entered through the middle of his back. One of the more perplexing aspects of the crime scene was the absence of Rachel's car, a brown 4-door Toyota Corolla that the couple had been driving when they were last seen alive. The vehicle was not found at the murder scene, nor was it located at either victim's residence, indicating that it had been taken by their killer. This issue was partially resolved when it was observed in New York City just prior to noon on December 5, 1988, the day before the bodies were discovered. A New York City patrol officer issued a parking ticket to Rachel's car while it was parked in Queens. The appearance of the vehicle in Queens approximately 24 hours before the bodies were discovered in Virginia raised significant questions about the perpetrator's movements and possible connections to the New York area. When Rachel's mother later received the unpaid parking ticket and contacted authorities, the vehicle was located in a New York City police garage, where it had been towed after accumulating multiple parking violations. However, by the time Fairfax County Police were able to examine the vehicle, months had passed and the car had been stripped and the interior was trashed. The condition of the vehicle, when it was finally examined, carried a significant loss of potential evidence. Despite extensive collaboration between various investigative entities, no arrests were made. The case entered the cold case files, where it remained dormant for nearly 2 decades. Police believed at the time that the killer was likely a local of the rest area, given the remote location chosen for the murders. However, without DNA technology and other advanced forensic methods available today, investigators had few leads to pursue, and the case gradually went cold. The case remained unsolved until 2005, when advances in DNA technology finally provided the breakthrough investigators desperately needed. The DNA evidence from the autopsy was entered into the National DNA Database and matched to Alfredo Rolando Prieto, a 44-year-old Salvadoran-born serial killer who was already on death row in California. Alfredo had been sentenced to death in 1992 for the rape and murder of 15-year-old Yvette Woodruff in Ontario, California, in 1990. He was born on November 18, 1965, in El Salvador, to parents Arnold and Teodora. His early life was marked by extreme poverty and violence during El Salvador's Civil War period. During the outbreak of the Civil War, Alfredo reportedly witnessed numerous civilians being killed, including his grandfather, leading to a later diagnosis of PTSD. His mother left El Salvador in 1975 due to her husband's abuse and immigrated to the United States. In 1981, she retrieved her children from El Salvador, settling in Pomona, California, where Alfredo attended Pomona High School. During school, he became addicted to substances and alcohol and joined a local street gang called 456 Island Pew. He dropped out of school and married Sandra Figueroa, with whom he had a child in 1984. In August 1984, Alfredo shot 3 people in Ontario, claiming his wife had cheated on him with one of the wounded men. His wife later testified that Alfredo subjected her to sexual abuse and aggression. Despite the serious nature of the shooting, the court showed leniency because the victims were also gang members, and Alfredo received a minor sentence, being released in 1987. After his release, Alfredo left California and moved to Virginia, settling in Arlington County, where his father had immigrated after serving a murder conviction in El Salvador. In Virginia, Alfredo found employment and entered into another relationship, fathering a son. However, his father's arrest in 1989 for rape may have triggered Alfredo's return to criminal behavior. In February 1990, Alfredo left Virginia and returned to California, where he would commit the crimes that led to his initial death sentence. The DNA match opened a floodgate of connections to other unsolved murders. Investigators discovered that Alfredo's DNA also linked him to the murder of Veronica Tina Jefferson, a 24-year-old CIA finance officer in Arlington, Virginia, on May 10, 1988. Jefferson had been found shot to death behind McKinley Elementary School, and her case had remained unsolved until the DNA connection was established. Her murder occurred approximately 7 months before the deaths of Rachel and Warren. Additionally, ballistics evidence connected Alfredo to the murder of Manuel F. Chermau in Prince William County in September 1989, but his killing spree extended beyond Virginia. Authorities in California linked him to at least 4 additional murders and rapes in 1990. In total, prosecutors believed Alfredo was responsible for as many as 9 murders committed between May 1988 and September 1990. His prosecution in Virginia became a legal marathon that spanned nearly a decade. Former attorney Robert F. Horn Jr. made the decision to extradite Alfredo from California despite his existing death sentence, believing that Virginia could carry out the execution more quickly, as California had already dragged on his appeals for 13 years. His first 3 trials spanned from 2007 to 2010, and in his final trial, he received the death penalty for his Virginia-based murders. In the years leading up to his execution, Alfredo's attorneys filed numerous appeals, including claims to the U.S. Supreme Court regarding his alleged intellectual disability. However, the High Court declined to intervene. In his final days, his lawyers made a last-minute attempt to delay the execution, raising concerns about the safety of lethal injection drugs that Virginia had obtained from Texas. They argued that the state had refused to provide important information about the quality of the substance and feared it would cause a cruel and painful death. Judge Henry E. Hudson initially issued a temporary restraining order, but later lifted it after a hearing, stating that Alfredo's lawyers had not adequately shown that the substances were unsafe. The judge noted that it was in the public interest for the execution to proceed, given the, quote, appalling number of people that Alfredo has killed or otherwise injured. On October 1, 2015, nearly 27 years after the murders of Rachel and Warren, Alfredo was executed by lethal injection at the Greensville Correctional Center in Virginia. His final words were, "I would like to say thanks to all my lawyers, all my supporters, and all my family members." Followed by, "Get this over with." Craig Williamson was a man who worked in commercial fishing and diving, particularly in the San Juan Islands of Washington state. Born in 1947, those who knew him described him as passionate about ocean life and marine environments. His relationship with Christine Reinhardt began in the fall of 1990 in port towns in Washington at what was described as an Indian medicine wheel retreat. Both individuals were reportedly interested in New Age spiritual movements and had attended the retreat seeking spiritual harmony through sweat lodges and group meditation sessions. Within a 1-month time frame, the couple had progressed from strangers to marriage. On October 7, 1990, they exchanged vows using rings purchased from a pawn shop in what appeared to be a spontaneous ceremony. The speed of their relationship would later become a point of speculation among investigators and observers who questioned whether such speed might indicate underlying instability or impulsivity in Williamson's character. Following their marriage, the couple initially settled in Olympia, Washington, where Williamson continued his work as a commercial fisherman and diver specializing in sea urchin harvesting. Reinhardt, who had professional experience as a mapmaker and drafting specialist, provided a bit more stability and organization to the relationship. However, both harbored larger ambitions that would eventually draw them away from the Pacific Northwest. Their shared dream centered on fish farming, a growing industry in the early 1990s that promised economic opportunity. Reinhardt also desired to return to her home state of Wisconsin, where her family maintained agricultural operations. This converged in 1991 when the couple made the decision to relocate to Wisconsin and invest their combined resources in an aquaculture venture. Their fish farming operation that they undertook was a substantial financial commitment that would later become central to theories about Williamson's disappearance. The couple invested their combined savings of $80,000 into the venture, but the scope of their ambitions required significantly more capital. They secured an additional $160,000 loan from Reinhardt's father and obtained a substantial bank loan of over $250,000, bringing their total debt to well over $400,000 in 1991. Located near the Reinhardt family farm in Clintonville, Wisconsin, their operation focused on raising tilapia, an African freshwater fish that was gaining popularity in American markets during the early 1990s. The couple worked extensively to build the physical infrastructure for their operation, adding to existing barn structures and installing large tanks capable of supporting tilapia populations. Williamson specially modified an old school bus to serve as a mobile transport system for live fish. As demand for their tilapia grew, Williamson began developing relationships with suppliers and customers across the region. This expansion effort brought him into contact with Eileen Kerr, owner of a fish farm in Alamosa, Colorado, who became a regular supplier. Kerr's later recollections of Williamson painted a picture of a man who was intensely dedicated to his role as a husband. By 1993, the fish farming venture was experiencing significant financial strain. Despite their efforts and the growing market for tilapia, the operation was struggling to generate sufficient revenue to service their substantial debt load. The financial stress was compounded by practical operational challenges. The specialized nature of fish farming required constant attention to water quality, temperature control, and feeding schedules. Any disruption to these carefully maintained systems could result in significant losses, adding pressure to an already precarious financial situation. On August 27, 1993, Williamson departed for what would become his final documented business trip. The journey was to purchase additional tilapia stock from Kerr's Colorado operation and to shop for backup generators that would protect their Wisconsin facility from power outages. The timing of the trip was complicated by Williamson's recent medical history. In July 1993, just 1 month before his disappearance, he had suffered a concussion. Reinhardt was reportedly worried about her husband's ability to safely complete the long distance driving required for the trip, as he was still experiencing headaches and blurred vision from the injury. This recent head trauma would later become central to both Williamson's claimed amnesia and investigators' skepticism about his story. His last verified contact with his wife occurred on the evening of August 30, 1993, at approximately 9 p.m. He called Reinhardt from room 112 at a Super 8 motel in Colorado Springs, where he had checked in while conducting his business in the area. During this conversation, he explained that he planned to return his rental car the following morning and requested that Reinhardt call him at 5:30 a.m. to ensure he could get an early start on his return journey to Wisconsin. When Reinhardt placed the requested wake-up call at 5:30 a.m., the next day there was no response from room 112. After calling multiple times without success, she contacted the motel's front desk and requested that staff check on her husband's well-being. The desk clerk's investigation immediately suggested something was seriously wrong. The room showed no signs of occupancy, despite Williamson's overnight stay. The bed remained made and appeared never to have been slept in. His luggage sat on a chair next to the bed, still packed and unopened, with personal belongings, including a book positioned on the bathroom sink. Most importantly, there were no signs of struggle or violence in the room, creating an immediate puzzle about how and why Williamson had departed. Reinhardt immediately contacted Colorado Springs police to report her husband missing, but was informed that she would need to wait 24 hours before filing an official missing persons report. On Wednesday, September 1st, Craig Williamson officially became a missing person in the police department's records. The initial investigation focused on the area around the Super 8 motel and Williamson's known business activities in Colorado Springs, but produced no immediate leads or evidence of foul play. Within 24 hours of the disappearance, the first significant clue emerged in El Paso, Texas, approximately 675 miles south of Colorado Springs. Williamson's credit cards were discovered discarded in a grocery bag outside a market, creating immediate questions about how they had traveled so far so quickly. 2 weeks later, on September 13th, Williamson's rental car was located across the Mexican border in Juarez, Mexico. The Chevrolet Corsica showed no signs of blood, violence, or struggle, but did contain what investigators described as beard clippings that appeared to have been cut with scissors. This detail would go on to fuel theories that Williamson may have deliberately altered his appearance. The evidence created multiple possible scenarios, each with different implications. The rapid movement of the credit cards to El Paso suggested either an abductor traveling south or a deliberate attempt to create a false trail. The abandoned rental car in Mexico could indicate either criminal activity or an attempt to suggest criminal activity while actually providing cover for escape. Law enforcement agencies in Colorado, Texas, and Mexico began coordinating their investigation, but the international border complicated evidence gathering and witness identification. The lack of any clear signs of violence left investigators uncertain whether they were investigating a kidnapping, homicide, or voluntary disappearance. Rather than accepting the possibility that her husband might be dead or have deliberately disappeared, Reinhardt developed and maintained her own theory. She believed that Williamson had been attacked at the motel and that the combination of this assault with his previous July concussion had caused severe amnesia. According to her, Williamson had wandered away from the attack site in a confused state, unable to remember his identity or contact information. The discarded credit cards represented the robbers' disposal of evidence, while Williamson himself had somehow made his way northward, possibly toward Washington State, where he had previously lived. This theory gained support from a reported sighting that occurred approximately 2 weeks after Williamson's disappearance. Judy Inman, a retired nurse from Montana, contacted authorities after seeing news coverage of the missing person case. She reported that on September 15, 1993, she had encountered a disheveled man on a train traveling from Montana to Washington who matched Williamson's description. According to Judy's account, the man appeared confused and agitated, displaying behavior consistent with head injury patients she had treated during her nursing career. Most significantly, the man repeatedly talked about fish and mentioned big tanks where fish from out of state were kept. This specific detail about fish farming convinced Reinhardt that the sighting was genuine and that her husband was indeed alive and wandering with amnesia. Based on the report that Williamson was heading toward Washington, Reinhardt, accompanied by her 2 dogs, Humphrey and Bogart, embarked on a 6-week journey covering over 7,000 miles across multiple states. She followed the route of the train from Whitefish, Montana to Portland, Oregon, photographing train stations and searching shelters, hospitals, and social service facilities. She distributed missing person flyers and conducted interviews with local media outlets to maintain public awareness of the case. On May 25, 1994, Williamson's disappearance was featured on NBC's Unsolved Mysteries, bringing the case to national attention. The show described Williamson as 49 years old, though he was actually 46 at the time of disappearance. 5'10" tall, weighing 190 labi with gray hair and blue eyes. Importantly, the broadcast included actual footage of Williamson that had been filmed in Wisconsin in February 1993, just 6 months before his disappearance. This footage would turn out to be vital. The initial broadcast of the episode generated significant viewer response, but no actionable leads that advanced the investigation. Fast forward to July 1995, over a month since that first showing of the episode, a rerun was aired. The second airing reached different audiences, including Key West, Florida. According to accounts, Craig Williamson was sitting in a Key West bar when the Unsolved Mysteries rerun began playing. As he watched the familiar footage of himself from the February 1993 recording, he experienced what he later described as a moment of recognition and revelation. For the first time in nearly 2 years, he claimed to understand who he was and why people might be searching for him. Following this, he contacted both Christine Reinhardt and his ex-wife from a previous marriage. His story, as it emerged through these conversations and subsequent interviews, closely paralleled the amnesia theory that Reinhardt had developed and promoted during her 2-year search. Williamson claimed that he had been mugged behind the Super 8 motel in Colorado Springs on the night of August 30th or early morning of August 31st, 1993. According to his account, the attack had rendered him unconscious, and when he regained awareness, he was in a hospital where staff addressed him only as Ron. He maintained that the combination of this assault with his previous July concussion had caused severe retrograde amnesia, leaving him with no memory of his identity, family, or life history. From the hospital, he claimed to have wandered aimlessly across the United States for nearly 2 years. He described eventually reaching Key West, Florida, where his diving skills allowed him to find employment. He had found work as a dive boat operator and instructor, utilizing skills that seemed to have survived his amnesia. His employer, Bob Ming, later described him as a very good employee who had mentioned being beat up and lost in the desert for 2 weeks. The Key West diving community had apparently accepted Ron as simply another drifter who had washed up in the Florida Keys, a population that traditionally included individuals seeking to escape or forget their past lives. Sheriff's deputies flew to Key West to verify Williamson's identity through fingerprinting, confirming that the man who had contacted them was indeed the missing Craig Williamson. This verification closed the official missing person case, but opened new questions about the validity of his amnesia claims and the reasons for his disappearance. The reunion between Williamson and Reinhardt was reportedly emotional, but complicated by his claimed inability to remember their relationship or shared history. Despite Reinhardt's hopes that seeing her would trigger memory recovery, Williamson maintained that he had no recollection of their marriage, their fish farming operation, or their life together. The couple made a pilgrimage back to Colorado Springs, hoping that returning to the scene of the disappearance might restore Williamson's memories. However, this trip proved unsuccessful in triggering any recovered memories, further complicating efforts to understand what had actually occurred. Despite the apparent resolution, law enforcement officials remained deeply skeptical about Williamson's claimed amnesia. Their doubts were based on several factors that suggested the disappearance might have been deliberately orchestrated rather than the result of criminal activity and subsequent memory loss. Investigators pointed to several pieces of evidence suggesting financial motivation for a voluntary disappearance. Most significantly, the $400,000 debt that Williamson left behind with his fish business. The timing of the disappearance, just as the financial pressures seemed to be peaking, seemed particularly suspicious to investigators. Rather than facing bankruptcy, foreclosure, and the destruction of Reinhardt's family relationships due to their defaulted loans, disappearing would allow Williamson to avoid these consequences entirely. Furthermore, several pieces of physical evidence discovered during the investigation seemed inconsistent with the robbery and assault scenario that Williamson claimed. Most notably, the beard clippings found in his abandoned rental car appeared to have been cut with scissors, suggesting deliberate grooming rather than the result of an attack. The fact that Williamson had $2,500 in cash when he disappeared also raised questions. If he had been robbed, as he claimed, it was unclear how he had retained such a substantial amount of money. The deliberate placement of his credit cards in El Paso, where they would be quickly discovered, seemed designed to create a false trail rather than being genuine actions from muggers. The medical plausibility of the claimed amnesia also became a subject of expert debate. While retrograde amnesia following head trauma is a recognized medical condition, the specific pattern of memory loss that Williamson described struck many observers as rather convenient. They mentioned that typically a person couldn't retain complex professional skills while also completely losing their sense of identity. Detective John Carroll of the Los Angeles Police Department's Missing Persons Bureau, who reviewed the case, characterized Reinhardt's amnesia theory as a, quote, very, very big long shot. Despite Reinhardt's 2-year search and her joy at her husband's return, the couple ultimately decided to divorce while maintaining a friendly relationship. Following their divorce, Williamson moved to California to stay with friends, while Reinhardt relocated to Wyoming to begin a new chapter of her life. For Reinhardt, the move to Wyoming represented both an escape from the scene of her traumatic experience and an opportunity to start over without the constant reminders of her lost marriage and the financial ruin of their failed business venture. I'm the Criminologist, and this is where we leave the lights on. If these answers raised more questions, you're in the right place. Subscribe for the next descent into the evidence, and remember, criminals leave patterns. We learn to read them.